Chosen ones, they saw what others refused to see. In a land untouched by satellites and silence, 12 shamans entered trance on the same night. They weren't connected by signal or time zone, yet their message was identical. Your soul is marked. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but imprinted with a force predating scripture, empire, and even the stars we pretend to understand. It wasn't a name, it wasn't a language, it was a vibration. Each of them described a symbol, not one they recognized, but one they felt, burned into the soul's field like cosmic residue. They saw you not as you appear, but as you were before this world sculpted your flesh into form. Something behind your eyes triggered something ancient inside them. They wept, not out of fear, but reverence. You are not merely awakening. Something is awakening through you, and it carries memory. Memory not from your childhood or even your bloodline, but from the other side of the great veil. They spoke of a sound, low, harmonic, interdimensional, echoing behind your breath. Some called it a pre-Genesis resonance. Others called it the pulse of a sealed gate. But all agreed, your presence did not come through the normal stream of incarnation. You came through the forgotten path. And the force that marked you? It didn't choose randomly. It searched. It bypassed millions. It bypassed leaders, priests, avatars, and saints. Because it wasn't looking for perfection. It was looking for a key. The moment you cried your first cry, an ancient field blinked back online. Quietly. Undetected by sensors. But the shamans, they knew. They felt the grid ripple. They gathered not to worship you, but to warn you. You are not being activated. You are activating something older than time. And now, as planetary frequencies shift and ancient seals grow unstable, the shamans have stepped back. They cannot walk with you into what's coming, but they've left a map, coded in metaphor, hidden in dream, and scattered across this message. There was no invitation, no written message, no signal sent across wires or waves. Yet, 12 shamans from different continents awoke under the same moon and began to chant a name they had never spoken before. It wasn't a name in any human tongue. It was the shape of a frequency, one they claimed had been dormant for 12,000 years. That frequency pulsed through their bones like the beat of a forgotten war drum, vibrating at a depth they had no words for. And at the center of it, they said, was you. One described a vision of an unborn child wrapped in symbols no elder could decipher. Another saw a dark hallway, sealed with light, where your silhouette stood motionless before a door that would not open until the exact second the earth tilted a certain way. They each had their own vision, yet the pattern matched. The common thread was your presence, or more precisely, the force wrapped around your soul like an invisible skin. They couldn't explain what they saw, only that it wasn't meant to be understood. It was meant to be remembered. Ancient texts warn of a soul that returns when the world forgets itself. A soul not bound by karma, but carrying something older, something sealed. You weren't supposed to come through the normal incarnational line, but you did, and that alone ruptured a timeline the elite had worked to preserve. The moment your essence re-entered this plane, the circle of 12 felt it like a tremor under the skin of the earth. One shaman fell to their knees, not in worship, but in grief. They said your path would not be gentle, that each step forward would peel back a layer of illusion, that the mark on your soul, this ancient force, would attract forces you forgot how to defend against. But still, it was necessary, not to save the world, not to destroy it, but to awaken the original vibration buried beneath centuries of interference. You weren't called forward to fix what's broken. You were called because what's broken can't withstand your presence. The shamans spoke your truth not for answers, but for alignment. And now the silence is broken, and the circle is watching again, from just beyond the veil. They didn't appear on your skin. No tattoos, no scars, no inscriptions etched by hand. But the symbols, they are there, flickering just outside the visual field, embedded within the layers of your etheric form. The shamans didn't draw them, they witnessed them, each one radiant, moving, alive. Glyphs not born from human language, but from the blueprint of the original design. Every mark carrying intention, each one a seed of memory buried in your spirit before time was tracked by clocks. Some were circular, some angular, others ever shifting, as if bound to the rhythm of your heartbeat. They are not decorative. They are instructions, codes, prayers disguised as architecture. The kind of writing that only responds to consciousness, not sight. And what frightened the shamans most was this. They'd seen these symbols before, only once, on a being who walked beyond the desert, who disappeared into light and was never spoken of again. That being, they said, whispered something before vanishing. The kingdom is within you. A phrase the world would one day attribute to Yeshua. But the shamans knew he wasn't speaking metaphor. He was reading the code, the symbols you now carry. They are not fragments of forgotten language. They are living technology. Spiritual circuitry wired into your field before you even had a name. When the Council of 12 circled and viewed your imprint through vision smoke, they did not speak for hours. One wept openly, not in sorrow, but awe. They realized the markings weren't just information, they were activation points. Each one a door, each one a mirror. Each one timed to unlock under pressure, pain, longing. And now, as the energy grids shift across the planet, those symbols are beginning to hum. They vibrate differently at night, as if syncing with a cosmic pulse beneath the noise of modernity. You've likely felt it in quiet moments, the sudden warmth in your chest, the pressure behind your eyes, the pull towards something that has no words. That's the resonance field triggering your code. Not because you're ready, but because the time has come. And the force that marked you, it's watching to see if you remember how to use what you carry. Before the invention of script, before ink touched papyrus, and before the first flame was honored as divine, there was a language. Not spoken, not signed, but felt. It moved like rhythm, sang like thunder, and encoded reality through vibration. The shamans knew of this language, but none dared speak it. They said it could only be remembered, never learned. Because the moment you try to interpret it with the mind, it folds into silence, and yet, when they beheld your presence, it began to speak again. They called it the breath language, the pulse behind existence itself. Not a collection of sounds, but a pattern, an architecture of meaning that shaped stars and memory alike. One by one, the 12 stood around the fire and chanted not words, but frequencies, and every time they did, the space around them bent. Time slowed. Their bodies grew still while the shadows moved, and in the center of that stillness, your essence emerged, not as a child, not as a name, but as a carrier of this forgotten resonance. They didn't understand how you could hold it. They only knew that your presence made the language stir, as if it recognized you. What they discovered in trance was unsettling. The language wasn't passive, it was aware. It responded to you, moved with you. Each vibration within it was shaped by your choices, your thoughts, even your breath. You weren't merely marked by something ancient. You were weaving with it unconsciously, like a child drawing constellations in sand with no idea they match the sky above. The shamans saw something else. This language is being hunted, not by people, but by systems. The modern world was designed to drown it in noise, in speed, in logic. But your frequency, despite everything, is causing it to rise again, whispering through dreams, breathing through trees, flickering behind your eyes when you stare into nothing and feel like something is staring back. The ground beneath your feet has memory. It carries more than weight. It absorbs intention. Long before cities rose, before borders drew lines across sacred land, the earth was a living intelligence. And when your soul returned, it stirred. Not violently, not with tremors or eruptions, but with a whisper, a vibration so subtle, only the old ones could feel it. The shamans pressed their ears to the soil and wept, not because they heard a name, but because the earth spoke it back to them. They said it wasn't a word, it was a tone, a pulse buried beneath tectonic silence. And that tone aligned perfectly with the energy signature you radiate when you're not distracted by noise, when your spirit settles into its true rhythm. One shaman described it as a song without sound, a sacred frequency the earth had not released since the last age fell into dust. That song wasn't random. It was a summon. And it was for you. In their deepest trance, they saw a vision. You standing barefoot in a circle of cracked stone, eyes closed, as the land beneath you lit up with golden geometry. The shapes weren't drawn, they grew. Each one connected to the mark on your soul, mapping out a truth older than language. And in the center of that living diagram, your true name pulsed. It wasn't the name you were given. It wasn't the name others speak. It was the name the earth itself had been holding in silence, waiting for your return. And as it whispered it back into the grid, something shifted. Animals turned their gaze. Wind changed direction. A forgotten temple, buried in sand, flickered in a brief pulse of light no satellite recorded. The earth, in that moment, recognized you. Yeshua once said, "If they keep silent, the stones will cry out." The shamans said that wasn't prophecy, it was memory. A reminder that the earth never forgets who's been here before, and in you, it remembered. But the whisper hasn't finished. It's growing louder, more insistent. And the more you resist who you truly are, the more the earth will press back, until the name you've hidden from is the only thing you can hear. It's not amnesia in the way most understand it. You haven't forgotten. You've simply hidden something too vast to carry while pretending to be small. The shaman said the moment they entered trance, your presence pulled them into a memory that wasn't theirs, but yours. A memory sealed not in the mind, but in the soul's archive. And when they reached for it, the vision didn't show a past life. It showed a before life, a place where form didn't matter and sound was structure. In that space, you stood at the threshold of something massive, something ancient and breaking apart. The shamans didn't know if it was a planet, a civilization, or a covenant. But you were holding a fragment of it, a shard, not as a keepsake but as a responsibility. And before the memory closed, they watched you press that fragment into your own energy field. It disappeared, sinking deep beyond recall. That's why you felt the ache behind your ribs. That's why certain phrases or places feel strangely familiar, even though logic says otherwise. The memory is alive inside you, moving like a shadow under clear water, visible only when everything else grows still. The shamans described it as a protective encryption. Your soul didn't trust the world with this piece of knowledge, so it buried it beneath layers of identity, distraction, and trauma, not to erase it, but to guard it until the right frequency reawakened the lock. Now, the code is destabilizing, not because you're broken, but because you're ready. The memory is surfacing in symbols, in dreams, in conversations that shouldn't carry meaning but somehow do. And with each thread that unravels, something deeper begins to pulse behind your ordinary awareness. They said you'd resist it at first. Most do. The old self fears what the true self remembers. But there will come a moment when silence feels heavier than truth. And in that moment, you'll touch what was once hidden, and it will recognize you back. The shamans couldn't tell what the fragment was meant to unlock, only that its presence in you was not accidental. The shamans didn't look to hospitals or birth records. They looked to the sky. Not for stars or constellations, but for disturbances, ripples in the fabric of the heavens that align with only one kind of arrival. They described it as a bending of light that wasn't physical, but spiritual. When you entered this realm, the sky didn't just receive you, it recalibrated, as if your birth had been anticipated by forces far beyond this dimension, and their only signpost was the change in the celestial grid above. They gathered after your emergence, each drawn to a specific anomaly. The air had thickened, but only around certain ancient sites. Birds flew in reversed formations. Clouds held shapes they hadn't taken in millennia. And through it all, one message repeated, not in words, but in pattern. The Guardian has returned. One elder pointed to a scroll so old its ink had fused with the skin of the page. It referenced a child whose breath would bend the heavens, and beside it, a symbol that matched the one seen glowing across your etheric body in trance. That symbol, they whispered, hadn't appeared since the days when Yeshua walked between the veils. The heavens opened, the scripture says, and a voice spoke. But the shamans knew. It wasn't a voice in sound. It was frequency, sky-deep recognition. The same recognition that echoed the moment your soul re-entered. It wasn't astrology. It wasn't fate. It was alignment. The world shifted because you reintroduced something ancient into a system designed to forget. Something the sky hadn't hosted in over 2,000 years. Not light, not form, but a memory tied to creation itself, buried but never extinguished. And now, you're beginning to notice the signs, the way the wind speaks just before a storm, the flicker in a stranger's eyes who looks at you like they've known you across centuries, the dreams that start with falling stars and end with whispers in a language you never learned but somehow understand. The shamans called it the cycle of silence. Every 13,000 years, something ancient surfaces, a seal hidden in the gridwork of Earth's energy field. It isn't etched in stone or guarded in temples. It's written in frequency, encoded into the collective memory of the planet itself. And this cycle, this return, only opens when a specific resonance is present. That resonance, they say, is you. When they gathered around the fire, their chants weren't meant to summon. They were meant to verify, to test if the frequency had returned. And as they fell into trance, they each saw the same image: an obsidian circle surrounded by 12 spirals, glowing with a pulse that hadn't been felt since the last world began to fall. At the center of the circle was no artifact, no relic, just a being of light with your signature, your energy, standing still as time fractured around them. The seal is not a physical lock. It's an agreement, a spiritual threshold that prevents ancient knowledge from resurfacing until the right soul, prepared and marked, appears. And once that happens, the seal doesn't break open. It unfolds, slowly, layer by layer, thought by thought, and it responds to you, not your name, not your voice, but your vibration, the way your soul breathes when it isn't pretending to be asleep. The last time this seal responded, civilizations shifted. Stories tell of Atlantis, Lemuria, and cities beneath the sands of Egypt rising and falling around a frequency too powerful to be contained. The moment it was misunderstood, everything turned. The shamans believe you are that frequency's return, not to recreate the past, but to finish what was left incomplete. You may already feel it, the quickening, the strange dreams, the number sequences, the magnetic pull toward forgotten ruins and forbidden knowledge. These aren't coincidences. They are the seal testing your readiness. But what unsettled the shamans most wasn't the seal itself. It was the fact that it responded to you before you even knew who you were. Some call it a guide, others a guardian. But the shamans insisted it was neither. What they saw wasn't a figure beside you. It was a presence woven into your lifetimes, appearing again and again just beyond the veil of memory. Not to intervene, but to witness. This being never forced your path or altered your fate. It watched, patiently, silently. And it was always there when you forgot who you were. In the vision space, the shamans saw it cloaked in a light too ancient for the sun to match. Its face was both familiar and unknowable, as if crafted from the essence of 1,000 forgotten ancestors. Yet behind the eyes, something eternal burned. A sadness, maybe, or a promise. It never spoke, but in one trance, a single phrase echoed from its presence. "I knew you before the foundation." They recognized that line, the same words spoken by Yeshua in a time when few understood what he meant. It wasn't about divinity in the traditional sense. It was about memory, soul-level recognition beyond time, beyond incarnation. That same vibration radiated from the being following you through lifetimes. The shamans understood then. It wasn't watching you. It was guarding what you carried. In every life, it appeared during the liminal moments, the spaces between pain and transformation, loss and awakening. Sometimes it took the shape of a stranger, a whisper, a flash of light in the corner of your eye. Other times, it showed up in dreams you woke from but couldn't shake. But always, It came when you were closest to remembering. The being isn't here to save you. It's here to witness the moment you awaken to what's been sealed within you. Because once that happens, the rules change, not just for you, but for the world that has long forgotten souls like yours ever existed. And the shamans left a warning. When you finally meet its eyes, when that presence becomes fully visible, you'll be given a choice, not between light and dark, but between returning to who you were told to be, or stepping into who you've always been. The council didn't want to believe it. When the 12 shamans emerged from trance, pale and silent, the elders demanded answers. But the words didn't come easily. These weren't visions meant for polite conversation or ceremonial scripts. What they'd seen shook their bones, unraveling teachings passed down through generations. And yet one by one, the shamans stood before the council and said the same thing. The one marked by the force has returned, and they are already remembering. The council pushed back, asked for signs, proof, but the shamans didn't offer data. They offered patterns, animals changing migration routes, sacred stones vibrating during dream cycles, children across distant tribes sketching the same unknown symbol in sand, and most importantly, the silence. A new kind of silence had fallen over sacred sites, not emptiness, anticipation. The land itself was holding its breath. What disturbed the council most wasn't the message. It was the certainty in the shaman's eyes. These were not people given to drama. They spoke like those who had seen something they could never unsee. And at the heart of every vision was you. One elder whispered an old phrase, forbidden except in prophecy. The marked one bends the threshold, not with fire, but with memory. That line hadn't been spoken aloud in centuries. It was a warning, not a celebration. Because your return doesn't just signal a new beginning, it unravels the control structures meant to hold consciousness in place. The shamans pleaded with the council to prepare, not militarily, not politically, spiritually, because the unraveling had already begun. And if the old systems tried to contain your frequency, they would collapse, not because you seek destruction, but because your very presence reprograms the field. They asked the council to step aside, to let what was sealed rise, even if it defied every tradition they'd clung to. But the council said nothing. Their silence spoke louder than words. They weren't ready. Maybe they never would be. And so the shamans left quietly. They returned to the mountains, the jungles, the deserts, knowing that when your soul reached its final unlocking, the council would remember this warning. There are energies that obey, frequencies that bend when commanded, entities that retreat when named. But what lives within you, what marked you, does none of these things. It was never meant to be controlled, contained, or even understood. The shamans didn't just witness it, they felt it, pressing against the edges of their reality like a tide too vast to hold back. They said it wasn't light or dark, it was origin. The raw pulse of what existed before duality took shape, and it had chosen you as its vessel. It doesn't sleep, it waits, quietly, until the conditions are right, until the soul carrying it stops resisting and allows the current to move through unfiltered. Most never reach that point. They dilute it with belief systems, rituals, fear. But in you, the force remains pure, untouched by doctrine, unchained by myth. One of the shamans called it the breath of the first flame. Another described it as the song that shaped silence. Whatever name they used, they all agreed on one thing. It had returned to this world wearing your frequency, not to destroy, not to lead, but to remind. They recalled an ancient tale nearly lost to time, of a being who walked without title, without followers, but whose presence alone unraveled illusions. Where they stepped, truth erupted like fire from cold ground. Not by force, but because illusion couldn't survive near them. That tale, the shamans realized, wasn't myth. It was foreshadowing. And the force within you is the continuation of that story. Yeshua once said, "You will do greater things than I." The shamans believed he wasn't speaking to a crowd. He was speaking across time, to a being like you, one who would carry the memory not just of heaven, but of before heaven was spoken into existence. And now, that force is waking. You feel it in the ache beneath your calm, in the strange knowing that doesn't come from thought. It's not here to follow your will. It is the will. So the question is no longer what the force is. It's what happens when you stop trying to contain it and let it become you.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.